Adult animation and its 10,000 carbon copies has seemed to skyrocket lately, but with mostly negative responses from fans of animation and the general audience. But why? What started adult animation? What popularized it? And why do we seem to have so much recent disdain for it? Let's get into it.
Welcome to This Horse's Anus.
Keep in mind that when I say adult animation in this video, I'm specifically talking about it from a Western, and even more specifically, American lens, though I will be discussing adult animation in broader terms near the end of the video. In 1972, Fritz the Cat, directed by Ralph Bakshi, is often noted as the thing to innovate adult animation in the States. Set in the 1960s, the film follows Fritz in an anthropomorphized version of New York City. The film, which is based on a comic strip by R. Crumb, intentionally and heavily focuses on profanity, sex, and drug use. It's noted as the first American animated film to receive an X rating. As an example of adult animation, let's just put an emphasis on adult. It's basically 90 minutes of softcore porn. It's nothing that would be, or ever has, aired on television, so what made the jump from furry porn to late night TV? Okay, so past pre-code animation and the Hays Code, we have MTV's Aeon Flux, which ran from 1991 to 1995 alongside Beavis and Butthead on MTV's animation showcase, Liquid Television. You may not have heard of it, but it has a decently sized cult following. To put it lightly, famous critic Leanna Satinstein called it cutting edge, bizarrely sexy, and certainly not for daytime television. Although series like Aeon Flux and its sci-fi Spielberg successor, Invasion America, are rarely successful today, their impact and following would help change the state of adult television forever. In 1997, Spicy City just barely became the first adult-only cartoon series airing on HBO. However, of the two that aired that year, only one of them is being talked about today: South Park.
I'm going down to South Park, gonna have myself a time.
Friendly faces everywhere, humble folks without temptation.
South Park, if you don't already know, is an ongoing animated series created by Trey Parker and Matt Stone. The series follows four boys, Stan, Kyle, Eric, and Kenny, in the fictional small town of, well, South Park. With a beloved cast and characters and unique cutout animation, most of South Park's sense of humor comes from the connotative subversion of animation. Basically meaning that the idea of cartoon characters, and especially cartoon children, being vulgar was practically unseen in the general public. Now it's a trope. Of course, adult animation didn't start with South Park or Aeon Flux. If you look at old Warner Brothers cartoons, or even further, you can see that there was already an adult audience in mind. Literally.
I've been asked many times, did I make my cartoons for kids? I never did. I thought nothing of the children at the time.
But that isn't to write off South Park's obvious influence into later television, and more specifically, adult animation. What makes South Park particularly unique, besides all of the other things I listed, is actually the production. Episodes aren't written a season in advance, but instead are written, storyboarded, edited, animated, and recorded all within the same week. Parker and Stone stated that subjecting themselves to a one-week deadline creates more spontaneity among themselves in the creative process, which they feel results in a funnier show. But it also allows the show to stay much more topical and responsive to practically anything else on air, besides something like SNL. Maybe. Sometimes.
No, I am not the evil, I just misunderstood.
Clearly, adult animation hadn't ended with South Park. In fact, it was just getting started. The Simpsons, created by Matt Groening, debuted in 1989 on Fox. With 32 seasons and counting, I doubt I have to explain anything about The Simpsons to you, much less the overall loss of quality in recent years. However, much like South Park, The Simpsons' influence is not something that can be ignored. The biggest takeaway you should get from this is the continuation of political and societal relevance and the emergence of the adult animation character tropes. So with The Simpsons, you have a parodized version of the American sitcom. Mom, dad, brother, sister, the works. In doing this, The Simpsons became much more palatable and familiar than its predecessor. And the subversion of animation and television's obsession with the sitcom format would set the scene for adult animation up until the present. So, fine. I guess I'll talk about Family Guy now.
It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV.
10 years later came Family Guy, created by Seth MacFarlane. In the context of this video, I would probably consider Family Guy to be a happy medium between South Park and The Simpsons. The Simpsons, by 1999, had already established itself as a witty, relevant, creative, pretty liberal-leaning, and still reliant on old sitcom tropes. Whereas South Park was, and always will be, South Park. Much grittier and much more vulgar than its Fox airing rival. Early Family Guy, though, was a lot like The Simpsons in comparison to how we know it today. Peter wasn't a complete asshole, and it still had a sitcom-like presence about it. However, the Family Guy that we think about today takes much more inspiration from South Park. Albeit a little less politically relevant than its counterparts, your most memorable Family Guy gag probably falls under a category of being gross or borderline offensive. MacFarlane's show would be so successful that he would later create 2 other shows of the exact same vein: American Dad in 2005 and The Cleveland Show in 2009. Keeping my own personal bias and humor far away from the objectivity of this video, it's still undeniable that these shows specifically have a continued lasting impact on adult animation today. Of course, there are a lot of iconic adult animated TV series that I don't have time to go into detail about, like Space Goes Coast to Coast, King of the Hill, Daria, Futurama, but for research and time's sake, I would argue that South Park, The Simpsons, and Family Guy are sort of like the big 3 for modern adult animation. So, okay, here's the part where I talk about the absolute state of things. Before you get up in arms about Big Mouth, or Hoops, or Brickleberry, or Paradise PD, or Chicago Party Aunt, or the British one, I'd like to direct you to a place called Late Stage Capitalism. Don't leave! Don't leave. No, but seriously, from both an audience and an animator's perspective, this sucks. The styles are bland, the humor and the themes are repetitive, the animation is weirdly puppety. It all looks and feels and acts the same. When I ask you about adult animation, what do you think of? If I asked you to make your own adult animated TV show in a minute or less, what would you say? Well, it'd probably have a family or family-like cast of main characters, edgy, millennial-based sense of humor. It probably wouldn't be very diverse, and it would definitely have a round, unappealing copycat art style. This, in turn, is a result of treating adult animation like a genre rather than a medium. When I was preparing for this video, I stumbled upon this thread, which more so talked about the production process of adult TV animation. And even as someone who was in school for animation, it was really eye-opening. I think it's easy to blame animators for, well, animated series, but unfortunately it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. According to Gray R. Goose's thread, there is a massive learning curve in the animation industry right now, in the shape of a program called Toon Boom, which is essentially an animation and rigging software being used more and more today, especially in animated series that debut on streaming services like Netflix and HBO. It's a high-stress, high-turnover job that no one is happy with, besides, well, streaming execs who see a formula and run it into the ground. Goose writes, quote, "We would feel guilty for taking vacation time because that would mean our work would be put on someone else, and you don't want to be that person. People were always tired, morale was low, and the schedule was just go, go, go the entire time. Adult animation warrants this cheaper style because artists just don't have time to do more complex things. We had about 7 or 8 months to animate a season's first delivery if memory serves. That doesn't even cover 1 episode per month. There's not enough time to consider your health. There's not enough time to consider your mental well-being. There's just not enough. I constantly worried for my coworkers' health. The timelines keep getting shorter, and job security keeps getting less guaranteed. I would love to see shows a la Primal, Final Space, Invincible, Castlevania, and so many other adult animation shows that are making such cool strides, but it's just not possible on those timelines. This also doesn't even cover pay and how that was low." End quote. Here's my suggestion, and it's something that Goose mentioned as well. Support unions and support animation that is doing something you actually like. Viewership is something that companies look at. If you want me to be honest, I would say that adult animation is actually at its most unique right now. In my opinion, adult animation's biggest failure is a lack of understanding what it actually means to be an adult. And I think that's why a lot of adult animation fans are actually more keen on watching series that are made for teenage children. Series that take a lot of time to have fun, to be ambitious, and to really explore what it means to grow up.